The first thing Callie Me Duval ever said to the stranger was, "If you touch that horse, I will shoot you where you stand." She meant it, both hands on the rifle, jaw set like carved cedar, eyes the color of dry summer grass watching the tall man freeze mid-reach toward the fence post where her mare was tied. He raised both hands slowly, didn't flinch, didn't run. He just turned around and smiled. The town of Dusthellow was not a place people came to on purpose. It sat low in a valley between two ridges of cracked red rock, the kind of place the wind seemed to forget on hot days and punish on cold ones. There was one general store, one saloon with a roof that sagged in three places, a smithy, a church that hadn't seen a preacher in 4 years, and 47 residents who mostly kept to themselves and minded the kind of business that kept them alive. Callie Me Duval was not one of those residents who kept to herself. She tried. Lord knows she tried. But she ran the only water well on the east side of the valley, maintained the irrigation channel that fed 6 farms, and had a reputation for fixing broken fence lines with one hand in a bad mood. People came to her whether she wanted them to or not. She was 23 years old, tall for a woman of that era, with long dark hair she kept braided over one shoulder most days and calloused hands that told the story of her last 6 years better than she ever would in words. She'd taken over her late father's property after he passed from a fever 3 winters ago, and in the time since, she had learned to do everything herself. Everything. She mended her own roof shingles. She broke her own horses. She carried her own water barrels and salted her own meat and stitched her own saddle leather when it cracked. She did not ask for help, and when help was offered, she looked at it sideways like it might bite. The man who arrived on a Tuesday, a slow, heavy-aired Tuesday in late May, came in on a horse the color of storm clouds, wearing a coat that had seen better decades but sat on him like it belonged. He was perhaps a few years older than her, lean in the way that men who work hard outdoors get lean, with dark eyes that moved across a landscape the way a hawk's do, seeing everything, missing nothing. His name, she would learn later, was Eli Voss. But in that first moment, he was just a stranger reaching toward her horse, and Callie had learned young that strangers reaching toward her things was never a good sign. "Easy," he said, voice low and unbothered. "I wasn't going to take her." "I didn't say you were." She kept the rifle up. "I said don't touch her." She was spooked. He nodded toward the mare, whose ears were flat and whose flanks were trembling slightly. Something in the brush behind the well, probably a coyote. Callie kept one eye on him and one toward the brush. She heard it then, the dry rustle she recognized, the particular frequency of a coyote working its way along the fence line, looking for a gap. She did not lower the rifle. "You can go around," she said. "I'm not passing through." He said it simply, without apology. "I'm looking for work." "There's no work here." 6 farms on one irrigation channel with one woman maintaining all of it, he said. "With respect, I think there might be." She stared at him for a long moment. The mare stamped one foot. The coyote rustled again in the brush. The afternoon sun sat low and orange over the western ridge. "Who told you that?" she asked. "Man at the crossroads. Said Dusthellow had a widderun spread on the east side that was either going to break or be the finest operation in the valley, depending on whether she found help before the summer drought." "I'm not a widow," she said tightly. "My father died. I was never married." He accepted that correction without comment, which she noted. "I'm not looking for charity cases," she said. "I'm not offering charity." He held her gaze steadily. "I'll work for room, board, and fair wages if the season yields them. I won't touch what isn't mine. I won't ask questions you haven't invited, and I'll be gone in the fall if you want me gone." Callie Me Duval had turned away 3 men in the last 2 years. One had tried to swindle her water rights on his 3rd day. One had helped himself to her food stores without asking. The third had looked at her like she was something to be managed rather than employed by. She lowered the rifle, not because she trusted him, but because the irrigation channel had a split in the secondary line she hadn't been able to reach on her own, and the summer dry season was coming in 6 weeks, and she was, if she was being brutally honest with herself, exhausted. "Bunkhouse is behind the south barn," she said. "Dinner is at sundown. You're late, you don't eat. You touch my horse again without asking, you leave on foot." She turned back toward the well. Behind her she heard him exhale, not quite a laugh, but something adjacent to relief. She told herself she didn't care what it meant. Eli Voss, it turned out, was exactly as competent as he'd implied and exactly as quiet as she'd needed him to be. He fixed the secondary irrigation line on his first full day, using a method she hadn't considered, and didn't mention it to her at dinner. She found out because she walked the channel at dawn the next morning and saw the work, clean, tight, properly sealed with the correct grade pitch, wrapped in canvas before the clay sealed to prevent future cracking. She stood over it for a full minute in the pale, early light. She said nothing to him about it. He said nothing to her. This was, she would come to understand, a language they both spoke. He was up before her every morning, which she found irritating, and then found herself relying on without meaning to. He had a habit of identifying the day's most urgent task before she assigned it, which saved her the time of briefing him, but also meant he was always 2 steps ahead of her expectations, which kept her slightly off balance. She did not like feeling off balance. "You've done this kind of work before," she said on the third evening, when he came in from resetting the fence posts along the eastern pasture line, a job that should have taken 2 days and that he'd finished in one. "Yes," he said. "Where?" He poured himself water from the pitcher on the kitchen shelf. She'd told him to help himself, and he did precisely and only to the degree that he'd been told. "Down south, mainly. A few spreads in the territories." "Why'd you leave?" He looked at her across the kitchen. The lamp was low and golden. His face was clean-shaved except for a few days' growth that she hadn't entirely noticed until this moment. "The work ended," he said. She nodded and turned back to the stove. She told herself she wasn't curious about what else he might say if she asked. She didn't ask. The trouble with Eli Voss, the first real trouble, the one that unsettled her more than the competence or the silence, was the way he watched her when he thought she wasn't paying attention. Not the way men usually watched her. She knew that kind of watching. It had a particular weight to it, a particular presumption, like being surveyed as property or calculated as a possibility. She'd grown up learning to feel it on the back of her neck and respond accordingly. This was different. He watched her the way you watch someone navigate a difficult terrain, with attention, with something almost like concern. Like he was calculating not what she was worth, but whether she was all right. She caught it first on the fourth day, when she was hauling the larger of the 2 water barrels across the yard. It was too heavy and she knew it. She'd been doing it too heavy for 3 years. She'd never had anyone else to lift it with her. She had a particular technique, low angle, use the hip, don't lift with the lower back, that worked but left her winded. When she turned around after setting it down, he was watching from the barn doorway, expression unreadable, saying nothing. "If you're waiting for me to ask for help," she said, "you'll be waiting until one of us dies." "I know," he said. He turned back into the barn. She stared at the barn doorway for a moment. He hadn't offered, he hadn't commented, he hadn't made it into a thing. She found that so confusing she thought about it for the rest of the afternoon. The first real test came on the 9th day. She'd been watching the sky since morning, the particular yellow-gray that meant a dry storm, the kind that came in off the western desert with wind and lightning and no rain, which was the worst possible combination when you had dry grass and wooden structures and irrigation channels that needed to stay sealed. "Storm coming," she said at breakfast. "I know," he was already eating quickly. We need to get the horses into the main barn and board the south wall of the bunkhouse. It's the weakest facing. I'll do the horses. He stood. You do the boards. 3-inch nails in the middle set, not the outer. The outer's cracked and the nails will pull under wind pressure. She blinked. She'd been meaning to note that about the outer nail set for a week and hadn't found the time to tell anyone, because there hadn't been anyone to tell. He said it like he'd known it for longer than 9 days. How did you? She started. I check structures when I arrive somewhere, he said simply, already moving toward the door. Habit. The storm hit mid-afternoon, harder than she'd expected. The wind came in from the northwest in rolling walls, carrying dust that turned the air orange-brown and reduced visibility to 20 yards. She had the south bunkhouse wall boarded by the time the first real gusts hit, and she did it right, center nails, good pressure, 2 crossboards for bracing. She was coming back across the yard when the wind shifted, suddenly and without warning. The main barn door, the large sliding one on the western face, the one she'd been meaning to repair the latch on, the one she told herself she'd fix next week, and then the week after caught the shift and slammed open. Inside, she heard the horses surge. She ran. She got to the barn door the same moment he did, coming from the other direction. They hit the door from opposite sides simultaneously, grabbing the same edge of the sliding panel, their hands landing inches apart on the rough wood, the wind screaming through the gap. Pull, she shouted over the wind. They pulled together. The door resisted, the broken latch mechanism was catching, and for a long moment they were both leaning back with their full weight, shoulder to shoulder, the wind pushing against the wood. She was acutely, uncomfortably aware of his nearness, the solidity of him, the fact that she could feel the warmth of his arm through her sleeve. The door gave. It slid home with a crack and he threw the emergency bar down with a practiced slam. They both stood in the sudden relative quiet of the barn, breathing hard. The horses moved and stamped behind them. Outside, the wind howled. She was still holding the edge of the door. His hand was 6 inches from hers. Neither of them moved for a moment. Latch, he said, and his voice was slightly rougher than usual, she thought. I know, she said. I'll fix it. I can. I said I'll fix it. A beat of silence. All right, he said. He moved away to check on the horses. She stayed at the door for a moment longer, catching her breath, telling herself that the warmth in her face was entirely from the exertion. The storm lasted through the night. She let him stay in the main house rather than send him back to the bunkhouse in the wind, practical decision. Nothing more, setting him up on the long bench in the front room with blankets she'd last used when her father was sick. She lay in her room listening to the wind and not sleeping. Through the wall she could hear him breathing, slow and even, long since settled. She lay there thinking about hands on a barn door and the specific quality of warmth you feel when someone is standing close to you after 3 years of standing alone. She told herself this was not a useful line of thinking. She told herself she should sleep. She did not for a very long time sleep. She had to go into Dusthellow on the 2nd Saturday of June for supplies and to file the quarterly water rights paperwork at the land office. She went alone, as she always did, leaving him a list of the day's work. She'd gotten through the general store and the land office, and was coming out of the post when she nearly walked into Garrison Webb. Garrison Webb was one of the 3 trouble-shaped things about Dusthellow. The other 2 were the lack of rain and the failing mine on the North Ridge that was driving men into desperation. Garrison was the kind of man who'd been big enough and loud enough and connected enough to run roughshod over most of what he wanted for long enough that he'd stopped believing anything could stop him. He had, for the last 2 years, been attempting to acquire her father's water rights. He'd tried offering money. He'd tried legal pressure, filing a competing claim that she'd spent 4 months and most of her father's savings fighting and winning. He tried sending men to suggest she reconsider. He'd tried once getting physical about it. That was the beating referenced in the title of this story. Not the only one. There had been 3 incidents over 3 years, each one leaving her with the particular knowledge that she was fighting a man who did not see her as something that could permanently refuse him. "Miss Duval," he said, stepping aside just enough to let her pass but not far enough to be comfortable. He was a large man, silver-haired, with the particular air of someone who'd been handsome once and now wore the memory of it like a costume. "Mr. Webb," she kept moving. "Heard you took on a hand," he said, falling into step beside her. "Wondered if that meant you were reconsidering your position on the water rights. Seems like a woman who needs hired help might be finding the operation a bit much to carry alone." She stopped walking, turned to face him. "My operation," she said carefully, "is none of your business." "It's everyone's business when you're the only water source on the east side." He smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "I'm trying to help you, Callie me. Take the offer. You could have money enough to go somewhere easier." "I'm not interested in somewhere easier," she said. "I'm interested in you stepping back." He looked down at her. He had 6 inches on her with an expression she knew too well. Patience worn thin, amusement turning cold. "That new hand of yours," he said. "He know what he's walked into." She felt the threat in it, carefully shaped, carefully deniable. "Have a good day, Mr. Webb," she said and walked away. Her hands were shaking in her pockets the whole ride home. Not from fear, or not only from fear. From the particular, exhausting rage of being someone who was constantly having to prove they had the right to exist in their own space. When she got back, he was in the yard, cleaning the horse tack. He looked up when she came in, and something in her face must have told him, because his expression shifted barely, but she noticed. "Garrison Webb," she said before he could ask. "Don't worry about it." "I'm not worried," he said. "I'm paying attention. There's a difference." She looked at him. "He has a reputation," Eli said simply. "Even I heard it at the crossroads." "Then, you know it's nothing I haven't been managing for 3 years." "I know." He held her gaze. "I also know that managing something alone and managing something with backup aren't the same thing." She didn't know what to say to that. It was accurate and it was kind, and it landed somewhere in her chest in a way that felt dangerous, so she picked up her supply bags and went inside. July came in hot and still. The dry heat of the valley floor built pressure in the air, the way a held breath builds in a chest, and Callie went about the daily work with the constant awareness that the worst of summer was still ahead. The irrigation channel held. The horses were healthy. The fence lines were in the best shape they'd been since her father ran the operation. Eli Voss had, somewhere in the week since May, become the most reliable constant in her daily life, which she had not planned and did not entirely know what to do with. He was not intrusive about it. That was the thing. He occupied the space she gave him and didn't push at the edges. He ate dinner at her table when she said it and disappeared when she needed the quiet. He told her things she needed to know. The east fence post is rotting at the base. The mare's left shoe is loosening. The sky over the north ridge looks like it'll give lightning again tonight, and didn't fill the spaces between necessary information with unnecessary noise. She had always valued silence. She had never, before this, valued someone else's silence. She found herself noticing things she had no business noticing. The way he rolled his sleeves up when it was hot. The line of his jaw when he was concentrating on something. The particular quality of his attention when she was speaking, not polite attention, not waiting for his turn to talk attention, but actual listening, the kind that felt like being held still for a moment. She told herself, he works for you, keep it in its right place. She told herself this, and believed it, right up until the night the lightning hit the north pasture. It struck the old oak at the pasture's far corner, dead wood, dry as paper from 3 summers of drought, and the tree went up like a torch. She saw it from the house window, a bloom of orange in the dark, and was out the door before conscious thought engaged. He was already running. She'd heard him cross the yard from the bunkhouse, faster than she'd thought possible, and by the time she reached the pasture gate, he was already at the fence line with the water barrel from the secondary trough. The fire was spreading along the fence line. Dry grass, dry wood, the wrong wind. She saw it calculating in the 10 seconds it took her to reach him. If it reached the south fence, it would run to the barn, and if it reached the barn, they would lose everything. "Channel gate," he said, not looking away from the fire. "Open the secondary intake." She understood immediately. The secondary intake gate, if opened fully, would flood the channel overflow into the lower pasture, not enough to fight the fire directly, but enough to saturate the ground between it and the barn. She ran. She hit the intake gate in the dark by feel. She'd worked this mechanism so many times she could do it blind, and she did, wrenching it fully open, hearing the rush of water pushing through the channel overspill. She ran back. He'd moved to get between the fire and the fence line, using the water barrel and his coat to beat at the spreading edge. She got there, grabbed the other side of the coat, still on his arm, and they worked together in the dark and the orange light, the heat pressed against their faces, smoke in their eyes. It took 40 minutes and felt like longer. When it was done, the fire was out. The north pasture was scorched in a 30-foot crescent around the old oak's remains, but the barn stood untouched. The overflow from the channel had soaked the lower pasture sufficiently to block any further spread. They stood at the pasture edge in the aftermath, ash on their faces, breathing hard. The night was very quiet. She became aware slowly that she was still holding his coat sleeve. She let go. "Good call," she said. "You knew where the intake gate was in the dark," he said. "That's what saved it." She looked at him. His face in the dying ember light was unguarded in a way she hadn't seen before, tired, and something underneath the tired that she couldn't name. "Are you hurt?" she asked. He looked down at his hands. There was a burn along the back of his right hand, not serious but real. "Nothing that won't close," he said. "Come inside," she said before she could think about whether to say it. "I have salve." He followed her across the yard. She lit the lamp in the kitchen and found the tin of burned salve her father had always kept in the third shelf left. He sat at the table, and she sat across from him and took his right hand in both of hers to apply the salve. She hadn't touched him before, not like this. His hand was larger than hers, rougher, warm. The burn was across 3 knuckles, a clean edge from something hot. She applied the salve carefully, covering the whole area, and she was aware of how quiet the kitchen was and how still he was holding. She didn't look up at his face. She was afraid of what she would find if she looked up at his face. "Thank you," he said, very quietly. "It was your idea," she said. "I meant," he paused, "for all of it." She looked up then. She hadn't meant to, but she did. He was looking at her the way she had once or twice caught him looking from across the yard, that particular attention, that quality of concern that wasn't evaluation. Up close it was different, warmer, more specific. Her heart was doing something she specifically did not want it to do. "You should sleep," she said. "Long day tomorrow." He nodded, didn't look away immediately. "Callie," he said, and it was the first time he'd used her given name. She'd only been Miss Duval until now. "Sleep," she said firmly, and stood up and went to her room. She sat on the edge of her bed with her hands pressed together and thought, "This is the most dangerous thing that has happened to you this summer. More dangerous than the fire. More dangerous than Garrison Webb." She thought, "You are a woman who has built something real from nothing, and you cannot afford to let your heart make decisions your head will pay for." She thought his hand was very warm. She did not sleep for a long time. August was when things shifted in ways she hadn't accounted for. She'd been watching herself, keeping the professional distance, keeping dinner practical and conversation limited to the work. She was doing fine, she told herself. She was managing it. What she hadn't accounted for was that Eli Voss was apparently also watching himself, and his version of management was different from hers, and the combination of two people carefully managing their feelings in close proximity creates a specific, unbearable kind of tension. It showed up in small things. The way a conversation would be going normally and then hit a particular silence that lasted a breath too long. The way he would be about to say something and then not say it, she could see it, the drawing back, the decision. The way she had started without planning to be aware of exactly where he was in any given space. She was making bread on a Thursday morning when he came in from the morning water check, and he stopped in the kitchen doorway and said, "The secondary seal on the East Channel junction is holding." "Good," she said, not looking up. "But there's a new crack forming on the north intake. I'll look at it this afternoon." A pause, she was pressing dough. "You have flour," he said, "on your face." She stopped. He was looking at her with that expression, the warm one, the unguarded one, and he made a small gesture toward her left cheekbone. She reached up and brushed at it, found flour, brushed it away. "Thank you," she said. She went back to the dough. A moment passed. He didn't leave. She could feel him not leaving. "Was there something else?" she asked. Another pause, she looked up. He was looking at the floor, one hand on the doorframe, the particular posture of a man deciding something. "No," he said, "I'll be at the north intake." He left. She stood in the kitchen with her hands in the dough and her heart doing the thing she'd told it not to do, and she thought, "Something is happening. I am not imagining it. Something is happening and I don't know what to do about it because I have been alone long enough that I've forgotten how to trust the way this feels." That evening at dinner, she asked him a question she'd been carrying since May. "The Crossroads man," she said, "the one who told you about this place, did he tell you anything else about me?" Eli set down his fork, looked at her steadily. "He told me about Webb," he said. She'd half expected it. "What about him?" "The incidents, 3 of them." His voice was level, but something underneath it was not. "The legal fight over the water rights. What happened after?" She was quiet for a moment. "And you came anyway." "I came because of it," he said. She looked at him. "I don't," she stopped, started again. "I don't need protecting." "I know you don't." No hesitation. "That's not why I'm here." "Then why?" she asked. It came out smaller than she meant it to, more honest. He looked at her for a long time. The lamp between them was low. Outside, the summer night was pressing warm and full of cricket sound. "I've worked a lot of places," he said slowly, like he was choosing each word from a careful arrangement. "I've worked for a lot of people. Most of them wanted someone to do what they were told. A few of them wanted someone good at the work." He paused. "I came here because the man at the crossroads said there was a woman who'd built something real in an impossible situation and was too stubborn to quit, and I thought." He stopped. "What?" she said quietly. "I thought that was worth seeing," he said. "Worth being part of, even for a season." She didn't say anything. The crickets were very loud. "Even for a season," she repeated. He held her gaze. Something passed through his expression, an awareness of what he'd said, an acknowledgement of a door he'd opened without entirely meaning to. "Callie," he said. "Don't," she said. She stood up, picked up her plate. "Don't say something that makes this complicated." He was quiet. "It's all ready," he started. "Don't," she said again, and her voice was not entirely steady. She went to the kitchen. She stood at the basin and breathed. She heard him, after a long moment, push back his chair and take his own plate to the counter and go out the back door. She stood there for a very long time. She pulled back. She knew she was doing it. She did it anyway. She moved dinner earlier so they overlapped less. She found reasons to be in different parts of the property when he was working nearby. She kept her conversations short, practical, limited to the list of tasks. He let her do it. He didn't push. He didn't ask. He just did the work and kept the distance she was building, and she was grateful for it, and somewhere she didn't let herself look at directly, furious about it, which was entirely irrational. 2 weeks passed like this. On the 15th day of August, the Webb situation came to a head. She found his men on her property at dawn, 2 of them, down at the main channel junction, doing something to the north intake. She saw them from the ridge and came down at a run, and by the time she got there, they had damaged the intake gate mechanism and were working on the channel wall. "Get off this property," she said. They looked at her with the particular contempt of men who have been told they can do whatever they need to do. She raised the rifle. "Now." They went, slowly, making it clear they were choosing to go rather than being made to go. One of them said something as they passed her, low, ugly, intended to reduce rather than threaten. She kept her face still and her rifle up until they were past the fence. Then she went to the intake gate and looked at what they'd done. It was bad, not catastrophic, she could repair it, but it would take most of the day and materials she didn't have on site. The channel wall had been deliberately weakened at the base, which meant she'd lose flow pressure by afternoon even with the gate repaired. She was standing there, assessing the damage, when she heard his boots on the dry ground behind her. She didn't turn around. "Tell me what they did," he said. She told him, clinically precisely. The gate mechanism was compromised here and here. The wall needed resetting over this section. She would need materials from town. "I'll go," he said. "I can." Callie, just her name, just that. She turned around. He was looking at her, and she had been keeping distance for 2 weeks, and she had almost gotten used to the particular hollow quality of it. And now, he was looking at her with the full weight of that attention, and she felt the 2 weeks dissolve in a way that was both a relief and terrifying. "Let me go to town," he said. "You stay and shore up what can be shored until I get back. We'll fix it together." She opened her mouth, closed it. "Okay," she said. He nodded, turned toward the horses. "Eli," she said. He stopped. "Be careful with Webb," she said. "He's connected to the land office. If he files anything while you're in town." "I'll be in and out," he looked back at her. "I'll be careful." She watched him go. The morning light was long and gold behind him. The channel ran quietly beside her. She thought, "I have been trying to protect myself from something that is already here." He was back by midday. They worked the channel repair through the afternoon, side by side, the way they'd worked the barn door in the storm and the fire in the north pasture, with the particular efficiency of two people who have learned each other's rhythms without meaning to. She passed him materials before he asked for them. He adjusted to her packing naturally, the way water adjusts to the shape of the channel it runs through. At one point they were both at the intake gate, working on the mechanism from opposite sides, and his hand landed over hers on the wrench. Not intentionally, a moment's inattention, the kind of thing that happens when two people are in a small space focused on the same task. He pulled back immediately. She felt the absence. They finished the repair in silence. When they tested the gate and the flow came through clean and strong, she felt the particular satisfaction of a thing made right, and turned to find him watching her with an expression she'd learned to recognize. She set down her tools. "I owe you an apology," she said. He looked at her. "The last 2 weeks," she said, "I was managing something by creating distance, and it wasn't fair to you." "You don't owe me." "I do," she said. "You've been—" She stopped, tried again. "I don't do this well," she said, "trusting someone who's close. I was doing it and then I got scared and I backed up and I did it at your expense." She looked at him directly. "That wasn't right." He was quiet for a moment. The channel ran beside them. Afternoon light lay long and amber over everything. What scared you, he said, not a challenge, honest inquiry. She looked out at the channel for a moment, then back at him. The feeling of not being alone anymore, she said. I'd forgotten what it felt like. When it came back it felt, she stopped. Dangerous, he said. Yes. He nodded slowly. Something in his face had opened up, the careful neutral that he usually wore gone, replaced by something more raw and more real. I know that feeling, he said. She looked at him. Why did you really leave the South Spreads? She asked. It had been sitting in her for months. He looked at the channel for a long moment. Then he said, there was someone, a man I worked with for 3 seasons. We were, he paused, choosing, close, in a way that wasn't available to us out there in that time and place. And when it became clear what it was, I left, because staying felt like it would break both of us in ways that wouldn't mend. She took that in slowly, held it. Do you? She started. I don't know what I am, he said, and there was a particular weariness in it, a honesty she recognized. I know what I feel. I know that in this place with you, something has happened that, he stopped again. I'm not sure I have the right language for it. I don't either, she said. He looked at her. I know that you are the most real thing I've encountered in a very long time, he said. I know that I have wanted to say your name for weeks because it sounds different from how I say other people's names, and I couldn't figure out what to do about that. She felt something in her chest unlock, slow and warm and irreversible. Eli, she said. He breathed in. I have been alone for a very long time, she said. And I think I've been waiting for something I didn't know the shape of, and I don't. She was surprising herself, the words coming from somewhere she hadn't opened in years. I don't fully know what this is, but I know it's real, and I know I don't want to keep building distance from it. He stepped toward her. 1 step. He stopped there, close enough that she could see the texture of the dust on his jacket and the particular brown gold of his eyes. What do you want? He asked, quietly. Not what makes sense, what do you want? She looked at him for a long moment. She reached up and put her hand on his chest, flat-palmed over his heart, the way you test whether something is real. His heart was beating fast. This, she said. The afternoon light lay over them like a benediction. The fact that they had found their way toward something true did not make the world outside it any simpler. Garrison Webb made his final move on the 22nd of August. He came himself this time, not hired men. He rode up to her gate with 2 riders behind him and a folded document in his hand and the air of a man delivering a verdict. She met him at the gate. Eli was visible in the yard behind her, working but aware. I've filed a competing water rights claim through the territorial court, Webb said, holding out the document. This is your notice. You'll have 45 days to respond, and I'm telling you now, Miss Duval, I have a judge in my pocket and a lawyer who's made this case 3 times. She took the document. Read the first lines. You've done this before, she said. You lost. I had a lesser judge, he said. Times change. She looked up at him. I will fight this, she said, as many times as you file it. You'll run out of money, he said, not unkindly, like he was explaining arithmetic. And when you do, you'll sell and this will be over. He paused. It doesn't have to be ugly. Take the offer. I'll give you fair price. The fair price for my father's land and the water rights he spent his life building is not something you can calculate, she said. No number you've offered has been close. His expression cooled. That hired hand of yours, he said, eyes moving past her to Eli. Hope he knows what he signed on for. He knows exactly what he signed on for, she said. Webb looked at her for a long moment. Then he turned his horse and rode away. She stood at the gate until the sound of hooves faded. Eli came up beside her. He's filing legal, he said. Again, she looked at the document. Same game, wear me down financially. Do you have a lawyer? I had one. He moved on after the last case. I can't afford a retainer for a new one." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "I know someone, in Abilene, handled land cases against connected interests before. He owes me something of a favor." She turned to look at him. "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to," he said. "I'm choosing to." She looked at him for a moment. There was something about the particular way he stood, steady, present, not going anywhere, that hit her somewhere old and deep. "All right," she said, "write the letter." "I will," he said. He paused. "Callie." "What?" "That he's not going to win." She looked at the folded legal notice in her hand. She looked at the land behind her, the channel, the barn, the pasture, the careful infrastructure of 3 years of stubborn work. "No," she said, "he's not." September came in with cooler air off the ridge, and the specific quality of light that tells you the worst of summer has broken. The lawyer in Abilene, a dry, meticulous man named Aldous Crane who communicated mostly by letter, reviewed the claim and replied within a week with a 3-page response that dismantled Webb's filing on 4 separate procedural grounds and flagged the judge Webb had named as subject to a territorial conflict of interest inquiry that Crane was happy to pursue simultaneously. Callie read it twice and then set it down on the table and laughed. Not a polite laugh, but a real one, full and surprised and long. Eli was across the table. He watched her laugh with an expression she had come to understand was his version of the same feeling. "He's good," she said. "He is." "What does he want in return?" "He said to call it even." A pause. "I did something for him in '89. He's been looking to square it." She looked at him. "What did you do in '89? The corner of his mouth moved. "Nothing that interesting. I helped him move some horses across a contested boundary before a legal window closed." "That's," she laughed again, shorter, "that's very specifically interesting, actually." "Is it?" "It tells me you had a whole life before this that I know almost nothing about." He held her gaze across the table. "You could ask," he said. "I know I could." She traced the edge of the legal letter. "I've been afraid to, because every piece I know makes it harder to imagine you leaving in the fall." The room was very quiet. "I said in the fall if you wanted me gone," he said. "I know what you said." "Callie," his voice was low, "I'd like you to tell me what you want, not what's practical, not what makes sense for the operation, what you want." She looked at him for a long time. The morning light through the kitchen window was soft. Outside, a horse nickered. The channel ran. "I want you to stay," she said. He breathed slowly, once, twice. "Then I'll stay," he said. She pressed her lips together. Nodded once, like the conclusion of an argument she'd been having with herself for months. "All right," she said, "then stay." Dustalo noticed, the way small towns notice everything, in the particular collective manner of people who have limited entertainment and strong opinions. It noticed that Eli Voss was still there in September. It noticed that he was at her side at the land office when she responded to Webb's filing. It noticed that on the Sunday she went to the general store he was there too, not shadowing her, just present. The way a person is present when they're somewhere they belong. It had opinions. Old Clara Hatch at the dry goods counter asked, with the particular brightness of someone who has been waiting to ask something for weeks, "Is that your man, Callie me?" Callie looked up from the flour barrel, considered. "He works for me," she said. Clara Hatch smiled with all the subtlety of a sunrise. "Of course he does." After she left the store, she found him waiting with the horses and thought about what it meant that she hadn't said no. That the most accurate thing she'd found to say was a technicality. "Clara Hatch says hello," she told him. "I've never met Clara Hatch." Nonetheless, he gave her the particular look that she had learned was his version of amusement. What did she want to know? "What you were to me." He took his horse's reins. "What did you tell her?" "That you work for me." He mounted, true enough. For now, she said, not looking at him, gathering her reins. She heard the shift in his breathing. For now, he agreed. They rode home through the afternoon light, and she thought about the particular courage it takes to let something real be real when you've been alone long enough to have stopped quite believing in it. The legal hearing on Webb's claim was set for the 28th of September in the county seat, 2 days' ride. The night before they left, they sat on the porch after dinner. The sky was doing the thing it did in September, vast and clear and thick with stars in a way that summer's heat haze doesn't allow. She was conscious of his nearness. He'd sat down beside her rather than in the other chair, and she hadn't moved, which was its own kind of statement. "Are you afraid," he asked, "of the hearing? Of any of it?" She thought about it honestly. Of Webb winning, yes. Of losing what my father built, yes. She paused. Of other things less than I was. He said nothing. The stars moved overhead in their immense slow way. "You told me something personal," she said. "About the man in the South, about leaving." "Yes. I want to tell you something personal." He waited. "I was engaged," she said, "before my father got sick, to a man from the next county, a decent man, good family. And when my father got sick and it became clear I'd need to stay and take over the property, he said—" She stopped. "He said he didn't want a wife who had a farm. He wanted a wife he could take home to a different life." She breathed. "And I chose the farm. And for a long time I thought that meant I'd chosen alone, that I'd traded one thing for the other, and that was the bargain." "It wasn't the bargain," he said quietly. "No," she said, "it wasn't." She looked at the stars. "But I'd gotten so used to believing it that I didn't know how to see differently." She felt him turn toward her slightly. "You see differently now?" he asked. She turned to look at him. He was very close. The night was warm and full of star sound. "I'm learning too," she said. His hand was on the railing beside hers, not touching, close. She moved her hand and set it over his. Just that. Her hand over his hand on the railing in the star-thick night, on the porch of everything she'd built. He turned his hand over and held hers. They sat that way for a long time, not saying anything, not needing to. When she finally went inside, she felt it moving with her, the warmth of it, the realness. She lay in her room and stared at the ceiling and thought, "This is what it feels like to not be alone." She thought, "I have been so afraid of this. It is so much better than the fear." The hearing lasted 4 hours and went the way Aldous Crane's letters had predicted. Webb's filing was rejected on procedural grounds. His judge was recused amid the conflict of interest inquiry, and the presiding judge issued a notation on the case record that effectively made future filings of the same type significantly harder to pursue. When it was over, Callie walked out of the courthouse into the autumn afternoon and stood on the steps and breathed. Eli was behind her. "It's over," she said. "For now," he said carefully. "He won't come back from this." She knew it was true. The notation on the record was too public, too official. Webb's power came from working in the gaps and the shadows. This had dragged it into the light. He'll find a different target. Probably. She turned around. He was one step below her on the courthouse steps, which put them at eye level. "I want to say thank you," she said, "for Aldous Crane, for all of it. You would have found another way." Maybe, she held his gaze, it would have been harder and harder alone. He looked at her steadily. The autumn light was behind her, she thought. She could feel it warm on the back of her head, and it was doing something to the way she could see his face, all the careful neutrality gone, something simple and true underneath. "You're not alone," he said. She reached out and put her hand on his jaw. Just for a moment, the gesture of someone confirming that something real is real. He leaned into it, the smallest fraction, eyes closing briefly. "I know," she said. She took her hand back. They stood there on the courthouse steps in the autumn light. "Ready to go home?" he said. "Yes," she said. They rode out of the county seat as the afternoon turned long and gold, and she thought about the word home and what it meant to have someone say it and feel it meant the same thing to both of you. October came. The irrigation channel ran slower in the cooler weather, which was normal, and they did the seasonal maintenance together. The cold weather sealing, the intake adjustments, the draining of the sections that would freeze if left full through winter. She had, over the course of 5 months, forgotten what the property felt like when she was managing it alone. Or rather, she remembered it, but it had the quality of something remembered from a long time ago, something that belonged to a different version of her. The version who had stopped trusting that closeness could be safe. She watched him work and felt the difference in her chest, not the dramatic difference of a story moment, but the quieter kind, the kind that comes from simply being known. He'd learned her silences. He knew which ones were working quiet and which ones were trouble brewing, and which ones were the kind she needed to sit with without interruption. He brought her coffee in the mornings now without being asked, because he'd noticed 3 months ago that she always made a pot and never had time to sit down with it. He had started leaving a cup on the porch post where she'd see it when she came back from the morning water check. Small things, the language of someone paying attention. She'd started leaving things for him too, without entirely being aware she was doing it. Tools positioned for the next day's work. Notes about the jobs she'd already done so he wouldn't duplicate them. His portion of dinner kept warm when he was finishing up late. The language going both ways. On a still afternoon in mid-October, she found him sitting on the fence of the south pasture looking out at the ridge, the way she sometimes found him when he thought he was unobserved, quiet in a way that was different from his usual quiet, stiller. She climbed up and sat beside him. "You're thinking about somewhere else," she said. He looked over at her. "What makes you say that?" "The way you hold yourself when you're here is different from the way you're holding yourself now." He was quiet for a moment. "I was thinking about the man I told you about," he said. "From the South, not," he paused, "not with wanting, with thinking about what I chose then, whether it was brave or cowardly." "What do you think?" she asked. "I think it was both." He looked at the ridge. "I think I was protecting him as much as myself. The world that we were in had no room for it. Leaving felt like the kindest version of an impossible situation. And now—" He looked at her. The ridge was purple-blue behind him. The horses moved in the pasture below. "Now," he said, "I think there are more kinds of bravery than I used to know." She thought about a man who had chosen to come to an impossible-seeming situation because something in it seemed worth being part of. She thought about what it means to know the cost of closing yourself and to open anyway. "Yes," she said, "there are." They sat together on the fence in the autumn afternoon, not touching, not needing to. Except after a moment, she leaned into him, not dramatically, just the slight lean of someone tired who has found something solid, and he shifted to accept it, easy and natural as water. They sat like that until the light went. The last night of October, she asked him the question she'd been carrying since August. They were at the kitchen table with the lamp between them, the accounts spread out. She'd begun teaching him the books, not because she needed help, but because it felt like a thing you do when you are no longer imagining someone temporary. And she set down her pencil and said, "What would you have done if I hadn't hired you?" He looked up. "Gone somewhere else," he said, "and found something worth staying for." He held her gaze. "I was looking for it. I wasn't sure it existed." "What made you think it might?" He thought for a moment, honest rather than quick. "Something the man at the crossroads said," he said. "He said, I'm going to say this directly, tell me if it's too much. He said she's the best thing in that valley, and she doesn't know it, and she's building something real, and she needs someone who can see that without needing to own it." Callie was quiet. "He said that." His exact words. "Who was he?" Said his name was Prentice. Said he'd done work on the east spread about 4 years back, before your father passed. She thought, old Prentice, who'd come through in the winter of '91 and fixed the North Byre and talked to her father for 3 evenings about irrigation theory, and left before the snow cleared. I remember him, she said. He was right, Eli said. She looked at him. The lamp was very warm. The accounts were spread between them. Outside, the October wind moved through the grass and the channel ran. Without needing to own it, she repeated. Yes. Is that, she stopped, is that still true, or has it become something different? He was quiet for a moment that felt very full. It's become something different, he said, if I'm honest. She nodded slowly. Tell me what. He set down his pencil too, both hands flat on the table. I would like to still be here next October, he said, and the October after that. I would like to know this place through all of its seasons and to know you through all of yours. He held her gaze. I would like to be part of something that has your name on it and your work in it, not to own any of it, to be in it, with you. Her throat was doing something. That's not a small thing to ask, she said. I know. I've only managed alone. I don't know what it looks like to manage together. Neither do I, he said, not in a way that worked, but I think it looks like the last 5 months. She looked at the table, at the accounts with both their handwriting now in the margins, at the lamp they'd been sharing without thinking about it for 100 evenings. She looked up at him. I think it does too, she said. He breathed out slowly. The wind went by outside. Stay, she said, next October and the one after. Yes, he said. We'll figure out the rest as it comes. Yes. The lamp burned quietly between them. The accounts were full of their shared arithmetic. Outside, the land lay in the October dark, the channel running, the horses settled, the fences holding, the whole careful structure of 3 years of stubbornness and grief and survival standing solid against the sky. Inside, 2 people who had learned to trust a different kind of bravery. Inside, a warmth that was not the lamp. She reached across the table and set her hand over his, the way she'd set it over his on the porch railing that September night. He turned his hand over and held it. They stayed like that for a long time, in the kitchen of the thing she'd built, with the accounts between them and the land around them, and October running long and cool and full toward winter. The following April, Aldous Crane wrote to confirm that Webb had sold his holdings and relocated to another territory. She read the letter twice and took it out to the channel, where Eli was doing the spring opening of the secondary intake, kneeling at the gate mechanism in the early morning light with the specific focused attention she'd fallen in love with before she'd known what to call it. She crouched beside him and held out the letter. He read it, looked up. It's over, she said. He read her face for a moment, the particular thing she'd given up trying to hide. Come here, he said. She sat beside him at the channel edge, the spring water running cold and clear and strong beside them. He put his arm around her shoulders, easy and certain, the way someone does something they've done many times and will do many more. She leaned into it. The valley was green in the early spring in a way it hadn't been in years. The winter rains had been good. The channel was running full. The pastures were coming in thick. Below them, the property spread out in the morning light, the barns and the bunkhouse and the house and the fields, the irrigation lines running outward like the veins of something alive. Something alive. Her father's work in her work, and now, something more than that. It was always going to be all right, Eli said quietly against her hair. I didn't know that, she said. I know you didn't, he held her closer. I did a little from the first day. The first day you thought I was going to shoot you. You were, he said, and she felt him smile, going to do absolutely no such thing. She laughed, real and full, the laugh she'd rediscovered somewhere in the months between the fire and the courthouse steps. The channel ran. The spring morning moved over everything, warm and full of the smell of new grass, and in the house behind them the lamp was still lit from breakfast, and the accounts were on the table with both their handwriting in the margins, and the name on the water rights deed that Aldous Crane had helped her reinforce was her name, her father's name, her land. And she was not alone in it.